So off the bat, exactly how important is this NATO trip for the president and for Ukraine?
Yeah, Joe has it just right. This is President Biden's fifth NATO trip, and this one is where all the core issues are really coming to the front. The discussion about expanding NATO and having Ukraine be a member of it, and how far will that go? And if not, then what kind of intermediate connections can be strengthened in terms of defense supply to Ukraine, pulling it in closer to the alliance? And as we saw, President Biden, he doesn't want to jump there just yet because that could require actual commitment by American military forces to fight Russia. So that's a big one, but that might be going too far. And then, of course, these other questions about NATO expansion with Sweden, a strategic defeat for Vladimir Putin to see NATO grow in its size. And these are going to be the top decisions, all in the background, watching this counteroffensive by Ukraine, which right now, clearly, it's not an easy one. And that's why we're seeing the deployment or the sending of cluster munitions by the United States to Ukraine. So this is really a pivotal moment in the war in Ukraine and why these meetings are so important.
Yeah, a pivotal moment. I absolutely hear you. And I appreciate you helping us paint those stakes. So are you saying that if Ukraine were to become a member of NATO, it would mean likely a commitment of U.S. boots on the ground to aid Ukraine as it fends off Russia?
As it stands currently, the way NATO is structured, yes, that is what it would mean. Now, that doesn't mean it'd have to be that way. There are other steps that could be taken. Ukraine could be brought into NATO, and there could be a carve-out legally so that the Article 5 commitment of all NATO members going to war on behalf of a country, if it's a NATO member and is attacked, perhaps Ukraine would not be able to benefit from that. But that creates a lot of different legal dynamics in all the countries. And so I think what we're going to see instead is a leaning in more by the alliance to support Ukraine. There's discussions about a model of like with Israel, where there's a decade-long memorandum of understanding of defense partnership and cooperation that we have with Israel, that perhaps something like that with Ukraine could take place instead of being a direct member right away.
Yeah, and we were looking at that headline together just a moment ago. President Biden saying in an interview released today that Ukraine is not ready for NATO membership. Are you surprised by that? Do you agree? Or is this just evidence of sort of the delicate dance that you're describing that the president finds himself in right now?
So, Natasha, there are a couple of things going on here. First, yes, this delicate dance about the actual war that is taking place right now, but also NATO as an alliance, it has standards, and some of those standards Ukraine hasn't met, related to reforms of its system, transparency, good governance, the kinds of standards that all NATO countries are required to meet so that it's clear that when they are members of NATO, that they can be relied on, that their books are open, that the corruption issues are not present. And so that's part of the leverage, quite honestly, that NATO has on countries that want to become members, is they can kind of clean up their act further. So Ukraine's in the process of that. They're certainly going to get a lot of help there, but they're not quite there yet either. And that's at least what I'm hearing from the administration. And so that's also something that they're looking at as part of the process regarding Ukraine and NATO.
Yeah, and you mentioned this briefly. Let's talk about the $800 million aid package to Ukraine. It does include the controversial cluster munitions. Help us understand why are they so controversial, and is this the right decision by the Biden administration?
Well, cluster munitions overall are a very dangerous weapon. They harm civilians in conflict zones. There are 120 countries that have banned them. There's a global convention against them. The United States, though, we're not a signatory to that convention, nor is Ukraine. Russia has been sending cluster munitions into Ukraine, and those munitions, they explode, but then they send droplets of explosions throughout with multiple munitions, and they're very hard to trace and track down and decommission. And in Southeast Asia, for example, they're still there decades after wars in Laos and Vietnam. So they're incredibly dangerous to civilians. And so for the United States, this is sort of the weapon of last choice that the president is providing, because Ukraine's running out of munitions against Russia. And in order to deal with this counteroffensive, they need more supply. The industrial production capacity of the United States is not there yet to supply enough regular munitions. And so this supply of cluster munitions that we have in storage, it's going to Ukraine. There are a lot of strings attached to this, a lot of commitments Ukraine is making to track where they're sending it so they can be cleaned up properly. The fail rate is very low, which is a good thing in terms of not exploding at some future later date, but they can find when they're exploded now. A lot of technical issues, but it is a very hard choice. Clearly, the administration did not want to have to go down this road, but they feel that it's essential for Ukraine to be able to maintain its offensive.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.